So I guess I'll take it away with the service course introduction, which is always terrible. But I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. Obviously, thank these guys, Phil, Owain and Callum, obviously for doing this amazing event, for an amazing cause. Obviously we'll talk more about Movember and what we've done today, and we'll get to the sort of nitty-gritty of why we're here as well. But my main thing is just like eternal gratitude for everyone who's joined us on the road and turned up. It's really nice to see. It's been a very weird year for the service course, with like being locked down from the start and then being able to do events. And some of the events we've done are for sort of people's entertainment, and then some of them really mean a lot to us, and this is one of those ones. So yeah, I'm really sort of humbled to have you guys here and sort of be able to share this space with you dudes. But yeah, I guess we'll take it away. You know the format. So I'm just going to run off now. No, seriously.
It's a very loose format for tonight.
Yeah.
I guess we'll start with like kind of a bit of an intro.
Yeah, like heckles, questions.
Anything, yeah.
Yeah, it pretty much goes.
Anything goes.
Like I'd say all of us are like fairly open. Obviously, this will end up on the internet to reach more people. But that's because it's such an important cause that has especially kind of touched all of us at different points in our lives. But I think one of the key kind of takeaways is that we're trying to keep it as positive and as hopeful as possible. It's just about kind of spreading the message and making a difference, I guess. So yeah, I don't know, Phil, do you want to?
Phil is a master of public speaking.
No, Phil. Like, I think it'd be really good for you to like start off just giving a little bit of background into your story and how you got into cycling, because you've got a pretty eclectic background. Yeah.
So, well, I grew up in Germany. My dad was raised out there with the British Army. Met my mum out there, and then decided to stay, and that's well, I've grown up there. So I've pretty much done every single sport you can think of. Played ice hockey, handball, ice speed skating, every sport you can do here, pretty much.
You said you were German champion in all of those.
Bit rowing, my brother was a German champion in rowing.
Okay.
So I followed his footsteps, was a rower, and I just didn't grow tall enough anymore. So I got put into Cox and didn't want to do it. And then watched the Tour de France on TV, and then decided I wanted to be a cyclist. And then got the old steel bike, started cycling, joined the local cycling club, got my first race license and entered the first crit, and never finished a race that year, never. Pretty much got dropped after half a lap, and that was pretty frustrating. Very frustrating. My mum said, you know, you should have probably stuck with rowing, but you know what, I'm going to join the club and get some proper coaching. And pretty much within a year, started getting top 10s, top 5, made the podium, and that's where I discovered track cycling through the winter. Went on the track, was scared like everyone at the first few sessions, and yeah, pretty much progressed from there. I was an endurance rider, and then randomly into the German championships in the sprint, and I was as a second year junior, came 5th, and that pretty much opened the door for me to join the sports school in Germany, which is what every athlete does in Germany. He moved to a sports school. It was first time away from home when I was 15. And you pretty much just focus on cycling, and school kind of comes second. When joined the German national team, rode the junior world championships for Germany, and was the first junior to ever go under 18 seconds in a standing lap. That opened the door for me to either like join the senior team for the German team or come to Great Britain. And my heroes, you know, were always the British team growing up. You know, you watch Chris Hoy racing, and all those guys win gold medals in Beijing, and they're always heroes of mine. And to be able to race with them, yeah, that was a dream come true. So I sat down with young Owain, who was a British coach, and we were actually coached by the same coach. So my coach in Germany was his coach, and I pretty much then got the conversation going for me to join the British team, and yeah, landed in Manchester, 18 years of age, in Fellowfield with Callum.
It was an exciting time. You didn't speak a word of English, despite your dad being English.
Yeah.
So
you knew all the swear words in the first week.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, Doull, you probably had a bit more of a kind of community introduction.
Maybe a bit more of a straightforward introduction to cycling. I guess similar to Phil, I did quite a lot of sports growing up. But nothing, I did lots of sports to a good level, but nothing where I was ever like actually really good at. And then I found cycling and started cycling, and I was actually got half decent pretty quick. And I kind of just fell in love with it from there. So I joined the same cycling club as called the Bendy Flyers in Cardiff, so the same club Gary Thomas went through, Nicole Cook, Luke Rowe. Went kind of through the probably the most, like how they describe it as a pathway. And when I first got into the under 16 program, they had like a pyramid. They say the bottom level is where you're on now, the next is the under 18s, next is the under 21s, then the seniors, and then the top level is the Olympic team. So yeah, more of a classic progression, and that's again I'm 1 year younger than Phil and Callum, so I turned up 1 year late.
Took you under wing.
When Phil was speaking a bit more English, and I still remember the first ever World Cup did in Beijing, and it's not a great World Cup to do. You stay in like a sports village, the food is terrible. Everyone's kind of just wants some normal food, and the moment I realised Phil actually liked me was he gave me a Twix. So Phil had done the World Cup the year before, and basically half his suitcase was full of Twix and Nutellas. So to get a Twix off Phil, that was a big moment. That was the moment I thought, we can do it.
We're doing highs and lows later, man.
I'm still waiting for my
It says a lot about Phil, that's 2 for a Twix.
I think it's because I messed up his Twixes often enough and hid them within the place. But yeah, so my introduction to cycling, I guess what attracted to me was the kind of community aspect to it, and I guess that ties in quite well to what we're talking about later on this evening. But basically, I'd done a whole bunch of other sports. I wasn't German champion in any of them, and I'd never really felt as if it was a good place to find that community atmosphere or to get better. And the thing about track sprinting, which is really starkly different from endurance cycling, is that you do maybe a 20-second effort and then you sit for half an hour, and you tend to sit with your friends, and it's a really nice place to build a little community. So my mum's in the audience tonight, and I hope you would agree that you didn't have to open your wallet too much, because the community was there for that. It was kind of like you begged, borrowed, and stole kind of everything that you started with. So my first coach was Alistair Watson. His enthusiasm was absolutely infectious, and what's more, I found in essence a kind of second family, I guess, of people who really cared and invested in my future and my career. And I was kind of quite fortunate through the whole of my career that I found that again and again, and one of the other times when I found that was when I met these two guys. And I guess Five and Coffee is a part of that as well. So Vinny, you're the MC, so I don't know if we're meant to talk about that just yet.
Yeah, it's too soon, man. So that individual coaching, like, how did you sort of come together? And like, you've obviously been friends for a long time before Five Rings, and you've obviously been to games together. Yeah. So I guess, how did that get to the point where you ended up being like, you know, I'll start a coffee company? Because I'm sure, yeah.
Well, I think Philip was like the fast
developer.
Developer.
You blossomed early.
He blossomed early.
Yeah.
So do you want to speak about, like, you turned up in Manchester, age 18, don't speak a word of English.
You like World of Warcraft.
Love World of Warcraft.
Oh, see, it's all coming out now.
You didn't know how to pay yourself or feed yourself, but somehow you turned into an Olympic champion.
So talk about the
2012.
2012. So
He was a world champion before you guys.
I forgot about that.
I forgot about the 2012 Olympics.
So I rocked up in Manchester, couldn't speak a word of English, and I had a severe World of Warcraft addiction. And we got to the point I was missing training sessions. Turning up late to training. Yeah. I was playing, 12 hours a day?
Yeah.
I can't remember the time of...
The annoying comparison is the coaches gave you a really easy ride.
Yeah, they did,
They're like, take it easy on Phil, it's not easy learning a second language. And I'm like, he's not learning. He's quite happy with what he's got.
So the first half half year I was there, I was a write-off pretty much. Just learning the language, you know, getting rid of my World of Warcraft addiction.
Hopefully making big
Actually, no, then started communicating with those who could speak the language, and then and I think from there I just started, you know, training, just developing as a person, as a writer, and could speak the language, and was getting used to full-time training. But the training we do in Germany was very, very different to what we do in the UK. So that was actually quite a massive change. And pretty much February 2012, I started showing decent times on the track. I was jokingly saying to the coach, oh, I could probably ride the World Championships. And pretty much 2 weeks after that, I got a call up to ride in Melbourne at the World Championships. And I think that gave me an extra motivation to just try even harder in training and to be able to ride with Chris in the team. That was always my dream. And the dream came true. Rode in Melbourne at the World Championships. We got disqualified. Jason came under too early, but we would have finished third there. And then I remember Shane Sutton came up to me, performance director, said, "Oh, you know, you're probably in the team now." And that was, you know, it gave me confidence boost to train even harder. And along the way to the Olympics, there was a lot of battles with other teammates trying to push into the team. You know, few people were upset that I was in the team because I was from Germany. Some people didn't really like it, so I was kind of stealing their spot. But I was getting faster and faster and faster. When you're 18, you develop so quickly. And yeah, pretty much 5 months after riding my first World Championships, I was in the start line at the Olympic Games and won an Olympic gold medal, which was something I would have never really dreamt of. Yeah,
but I think for us it was quite. I want to say the word inspiring.
Shocking. I was about to ask this. You know, for you, obviously following through that pathway.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this guy who you know met before, dropped on your doorstep, probably trying to get you, probably asking for him to cook for you all the time and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Tell them what Dave B said to you when he came into the gym.
Oh yeah, so Phil's not known for being the model athlete. And Dave Brailsford came in, and this was when Phil was climbing up the ladder of ascendancy, doing really well. And he came up to me and he went, "Look at Phil. Look at how fast he's progressed. You need to do exactly what he's doing." So I was looking at you all absolutely furious. Cook pops for breakfast. Not washing my clothes properly. World of Warcraft addiction. But I think like on a genuine point, like what I really admire about you. This is getting a bit close. We're going to get deeper into this later. But I think what I really admire about you is you always knew what was best for you. And you always stuck like firmly close to your guns. So I think in cycling you have the artists and you have the scientists, and you're very much on the artistic side. It's like a whole lot of stuff that you do makes no logical sense in anyone's world whatsoever, but it works for you. And I think from our point of view anyway, that was quite an early point for us to realise that not only was it possible, but that you should do it with your own stamp and your kind of own way of doing things. But I'd say by the time we got to 2016, that was a very different story. So, you know, it sounds like a pretty dream ascendancy to the 2012 Olympic Games. But I guess when I took over from Chris Hoy when he retired, I had some pretty big shoes to fill. You know, Britain's most successful Olympian. And not only that, I had to go in a team alongside reigning Olympic champion for Lions and Jason Kenny, who is now Britain's most successful Olympian as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes. So the pressure was on, and I was just this kind of like young, quite scrawny kid, I guess at that time, that was just continually trying to make a name for myself, and the pressure was absolutely humongous. And because Chris and I had come from the same city, I'd quite often been called the next Chris Hoy from about the age of 12, 13, something like that. And we went through this really bumpy road where it was immediately evident, even though it's a team event, it was continually evident that it was me that was letting the side down. Because we go to these races all around the world, and even though it's a team event, they'll individualise the timings on each rider. So say like Philip Hines breaks the world record, he's in first place. Jason Kenny takes over, he still keeps him in first place. Callum Skinner does the 16th quickest lap of the competition, and overall that adds up to about 6th or 7th place. So I know like every time people turn on TV, and especially when you're watching British track cyclists, you almost expect them to win. It's a given. And I think that's probably where we get a lot of our Olympic following is, you know, we've done pretty badly in athletics or whatever it is, but you know, sure, fire bet, turn on the track cycling, we should be plenty of gold. But we struggled to even qualify. And yeah, William Hill had us at 22-1 before the games. At the point,
you have a gamble addiction.
Well, the interesting thing is like some people did believe in us, and that brought the odds down over time because they were betting so much money on us. So there's plenty more people out there that have made more money off of my Olympic gold than I've made myself. All credit to them. But there was a huge amount of pressure, but I think what was quite nice is that community aspect always stayed. Like we never got it right the whole time. I think for a lot of the time you were determined just to go out and do the best that you possibly could. But I think 6 months before the games, when it was getting really serious, it was more about how can we go quicker as a team, and that family element kind of really came to life. And that also kind of spilled over from the endurance side as well. I think it was, you know, we were the first event that was going to be up in Rio, the first team that was going to race, and we really set the precedent. And by this point, the press were kind of really determined to shoot us down. I think it's quite a British thing. I think in other countries they're all about like keep winning as long as possible. Yeah. But in the UK it's more kind of like you've been really successful, but the next story is about when it's going to end. And we were the first team to arrive in Rio. We'd finished 6th at the World Championships 4 or 5 months before. And I think we were kind of maybe pitching for a bronze. That would be the best case scenario. Medal would have been nice. Yeah. And I think we beat ourselves down too low because you had all these journalists saying to you again, like when we had the press conference at the Celtic Manor before we fly out to Rio, and Doull was getting asked questions about like how awesome is it going to feel if you win gold, and we were getting asked questions as in like, have you been to Rio before? Do you think it'll be a pleasant experience? It's all about gaining experience, isn't it? And we were kind of like, well, you know, we still think we can put in a good ride here. But again, going back to that community element, as much as Chris Hoy was a bit of a kind of shadow that laid over my career in terms of trying to get to the similar kind of level that he was at, what was really nice and consistent was he was probably the first guy who cemented my love for cycling. Like it was between a whole bunch of different sports, and this is back when I was 12. When I did rugby, I didn't see, I'm going to bore you with some Scottish rugby names. I didn't see like Chris Patterson or, you know, like any of the other kind of big Scottish names come down and see us training. But in Meadowbank, because it was such a small, almost kind of insular community, like Chris came down 4 or 5 times, and it cemented that love and that ambition, I guess, as well as the community spirit. And quite fittingly, the day before we raced in Rio, he came in to the village, came to us for dinner, and I think it'd be fair to say like our heads were not low, but like we weren't expecting big things. And he came up to us and he was like, guys, you're going to do it again. Like the whole world's going to be scratching their heads thinking, fuck me, GB have basically, you know, taken over the world all over again. And we were like, yeah, and we were no, genuinely. And I was like, mate, you retired a couple of years ago. Things have changed. But he was right. Like we set an Olympic record in the first ride. You know, all that pressure kind of immediately fell off, and what was most interesting was, as much as we stayed strong because of that continual adversity over time, is that it was actually the odds-on favourites, the Kiwis, that started losing their heads. Like they were shouting and screaming and all this kind of stuff in the pit, which is a bit unusual in track cycling. And we were just kind of there for the ride, and ultimately, I guess, me and you ended up on the top step of the podium with, you know, 2 of my best mates, and Olympic gold medal and an Olympic record, and honestly couldn't be happier. And hell of a turnaround from 6th to 1st for sure. So yeah, it was awesome. And then obviously had to race Jason the next day and settle for silver. That's what the fan
took him to McDonald's and that.
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah. So
it's spiking with McDonald's. Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm waffling on a little bit. But it's always a key talking point that people want to know what happens in the village. It's like, are all the rumours true? Partially, yes. But one of the main rumours is that there's free unlimited McDonald's. So Jason and I just won gold, pretty happy with ourselves. Phil, at this point, was meant to be the reserve, but basically just went on a continual bender from that point. So would have been a pretty useless reserve. And we go through the competition. So we go through the competition phases all the way, and it turns out it's going to be Jason and myself, I guess, against each other for the final. But the way that happens in the Olympics is that it's over 3 days. So we both got to the semi-finals, and then it was like, okay, we have to spend the night together because we were sharing. So I did what any good teammate would do and took him to McDonald's to try and slow him down a little bit. A few McNuggets, maybe a packet of chips. Yeah, and it was free, so why wouldn't you? But I think it shows the strength of our character and the strength of our team that Jason and I were so easily able to turn that off when we were socialising and turn it on when we were on the track. And I guess to like attach a story to that, because we were sharing, we were in these tiny rooms. It was probably about like this wide with 2 twin beds. And I remember trying to wind them up a little bit before we went to sleep, like just joking with them. And I was like, oh, Jason, we got the Olympic final tomorrow. And I remember like I turned off the lights and I said like, good night, Jason, sleep well. And I put on my best possible death sticker. And his face was like there. So I like, got myself ready, switched on the lights again. Coincidentally, he was facing me, and I went, sleep well. And he absolutely destroyed me the next day. So that was the end of that. But yeah, I think I've waffled on enough about my Olympic experience.
I enjoy it every single time, if anything more.
But if anything, your race, like my heart was in my mouth for your Olympic final.
Yeah,
by miles.
I'd say compared to you guys, our journey for the games was a bit more straightforward. Again, similar to what Callum had, we had 3 of the defending Olympic champions in the team, Brad Wiggins, Ed Clancy and Steve Burke. So it was a bit of pressure on me, some you family, you know, like having to step up to that level. But at the same time, I think I took confidence from that, thinking if I'm on the track, I want the 3 best guys in the world as my teammates. I don't want to be racing against them. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And we've been second in the world in Paris in 2014, second in London in 2015, and both times lost out by a tiny margin. So we knew we were in the ballpark. I think going into the games, you have a holding camp. It's always in Newport. So to be in Cardiff, it's absolutely great. You stay in like Celtic Man in a lovely hotel.
So related.
It's lovely.
Is this like Celebs, by the way?
What's that?
It's the same place as I'm Celebs.
Almost identical.
But the holding camp is like a really strange time because everyone's training so hard, you've got selected, you're super happy to be there. And then you kind of just get to the camp and it's all a taper, so you're all just in great form. And it's a really bizarre thing when you sit down at the field table, you chat to another squad, like, how did your training go? Like, oh, we broke the world record today. Oh, so did we. And it's just like a really strange atmosphere. So going into the Olympics, we knew we had something really special, and I think we kind of thought we were probably going to win. And we got through all the rounds really well. And then we had the Aussies in the final. It's always the Aussies in the final. And we had a good gap on them, but you just never know what to expect. And obviously we'd seen a couple of hours before, or even the night before, sorry, Phil and Callum and Jason had won. And like kind of the ball had started rolling. And the Aussies just went full mad dog. And honestly, we thought we had 3 seconds on them in every single round. We thought this should be comfortable, but they really took it to us, and we ended up winning by, I think it was a 10th in the end. And essentially, I don't know how much everyone knows about team pursuit. There's 4 of you in a line. You take rotation turns, and the first team to cross the line wins. But you have to finish with a minimum of 3 riders. So we were all under the cosh, and normally, if you're pulling out the line, you don't intend to finish or you can't finish, you should shout as loud as you can 3. Berkey changed and for some reason decided not to shout 3. So I'm rattling around, I think we've got a lap and a quarter to go, we're up. I think, well, I'm going to do this last turn because I know there's the 3 lads behind me, so I don't have to finish. Swing up, think I'm done, and then I look down, and it's the worst sight you can possibly see in team shooting. It's when there's 2 people there, and the 3rd person's on the other side of the track. So I literally threw my bike down as fast as I could. I was just chasing. And I just about managed to latch on in the last 30, 40 metres. And we won by a 10th, so it was...
That was where the weight of the Olympic title was solely on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Because we were watching it on TV and we were like, fuck. This is like the worst possible case scenario.
And it would have been down to human error rather than
an
actual performance thing that we weren't good enough. But like you said, afterwards it was amazing. And one of my favourite stories which came out of the Olympics was Phil, you had a rough time with press stuff around 2012. Yeah. And
if you don't know what we're on about, Google it.
And after 2016, it was quite nice for you, I think, because basically all the companies and all the national teams have like their own houses, and it's basically just like a big party place, really corporate. But it's a really good night. And it was the first night we just won. Well, we've won the night before, and we all went to Team GB House. So we rocked up as the whole Team Pursuit squad, the 4 of us, and Phil on his own. And obviously Phil being part of the team event for a couple of years, it was going to be a nice moment with him to say, oh, okay, Phil, because it's just you, we'll introduce you first if you want it. So it's like his kind of moment in the limelight, you know. And they said, we'll introduce the Team Pursuit boys afterwards. And in Team GB House, loads of people there, they put the spotlights on, turn the music off, they said, we have some very special guests in here tonight. First up, an Olympic gold medalist from the Team Pursuit, David Hindes.
I'm the child was already walking in waving.
So then for about a year we called Dave.
I think that's a good example of like what we try and do with 5 Lanes as well. So it's like if anyone happens to have purchased or seen any of the cards lying around, like we always try and put a bit of our personality into the coffee.
Yeah.
So for instance, like our main kind of coffee is called Blind Faith, and that's about when Phil, on the same evening, I believe.
It was the same evening,
yeah. Same evening, so you're probably better at telling it than I am.
It was
the same night?
I think it was the same night. Blind Faith is named after the song by Jason Statham, Blind Faith. Hopefully we don't get sued at some stage. But essentially, the whole story is based around, it's a Brazilian coffee, so the link is there. And on the story card, it pretty much tells the story of like that high at the Olympics. You've been working so hard for it. You have an amazing experience with your friends. And I remember walking. I was in Team GB House and I hadn't seen Phil for a little while. So I went searching for him. Couldn't see him there. Couldn't see him. I could see him right at the front. Chasing Status, the actual DJ, were playing it. It was like their big headliner, and they were playing Blind Faith.
We were drinking since 9 AM as well.
Yeah, that's right. And I walked up, and he was bawling his eyes out. He couldn't stop crying. I was really concerned with a friend. I was like, Phil, are you okay, mate? He went, oh, I'm just so happy I can't stop crying.
Oh, it's a loving life then.
That's, for example, why Blind Faith is named Blind Faith.
Yeah,
There's lots of stories like that.
Yeah.
I think for us that's what makes a difference in like, you know, cycling and coffee go together obviously really well. Otherwise this establishment might not exist.
Very true. Yeah.
Very true, thank you.
Would be neighbours.
Yes.
Either or.
But I think you know what all of us have taken out of our careers, or for those that are yet to finish, is that what you remember isn't necessarily like the results or your peak power or what times you did. It's the friends and the people that you've met along the way and the experiences you've shared. And that's what we really try and put into 5 Lanes Coffee, basically, is to try and share that side of us.
So how did the actual coffee side of it come out?
So,
yeah.
we were actually round the corner for you when I was living in Wilmslow. Phil and me went to Chili Banana, a lovely establishment. Phil said, I think I'm going to start a coffee company. Oh man, that's cool.
By the way, he does this about every week. He's like, I'm going to be a magician.
Yeah.
I'm going to start a coffee company. I'm going to vlog.
And he said, I've got the name ready. 5 Lanes Coffee. Oh, saw me and I was like, that's a cool name. And I was like, do you want me to be involved? He went, yeah, come on then. So we started this conversation. And then I went, mate, tell you should get involved. Because Callum, he just retired at the time. And Callum, I've got no shame in saying this, and Phil probably argued, but Callum's the smartest out of us. So I was like, we've got a bit of brains behind the operation now. So I said, should we get Callum involved? Phil went, he went, we don't need him. Don't need him. And I was sat there,
Callum likes to start things and then just leave it there.
I was like, I think we do need Callum, Phil. And he was like, nah. Took maybe 2 weeks, and then eventually was like, fine, Callum. And that's kind of where it started.
Yeah. No, I mean, thank you for getting me involved, Phil.
You do like to start things and then...
I mean, I'd love to see an alternative universe where this just took off as a passion project.
That would have never happened to me.
Maybe he was just sucking us in.
Yeah, maybe.
He was playing the long game.
But I've been involved in a few of your enterprises, and they're always interesting. Yeah.
But it started from there, and then we ended up doing everything with it, and we launched it May 2020. So Bob in the middle of the pandemic and lockdown. Yeah, not the best time.
People were making coffee at home.
Yeah, but it worked for us, and yeah, honestly, the support we've had for the company so far has been amazing. And I think it's something we're really passionate about as a group, and also in a way because Phil's now retired as well. You moved back to Carlisle.
I'll stay on this bit before really.
Yeah, well, you were kind of
Carlisle.
You're in Carlisle.
Yeah.
You're busy, I'm busy, but it's for us. It's like an extension of our friendship. It's just like a good excuse to catch up, you know. And like we'll have business calls, and maybe 15 minutes of it will be talking about coffee. An hour and a half of taking the piss.
It's not even 15, is it?
My favourite bit is the business dinners, and we
Yeah.
spend
A few business dinners.
Anyway, you shouldn't have said that. Yeah, I guess we should talk about why we're here today, I guess.
Yeah.
Because that's more important.
Got to be done, yeah.
For sure.
You followed the list pretty well, by the way, guys.
Just intro you.
I know it has. Yeah, it's all come down to this moment. So yeah, I guess let's chat about that.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I've always found with charity stuff, I'm always a big supporter of it. But until you're touched by something personally, it's hard to have that really deep affinity and connection to it. And I lost one of my best friends in 2020 during lockdown. And since then, it's kind of been, you go through kind of all the emotions. But what I felt is something I never want anyone else to feel, either personally going through it, or as a friendship group, or as a family. So Movember and men's mental health, specifically around suicide, has always been, well not always, but specifically now, is something I'm really passionate about. And I did bits and bobs with Movember last year, the response was amazing. And I know Vinny's very passionate about it also.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And Movember wanted me to do something again, and I wanted to try and create something which I actually, not so much a physical challenge for myself, but something I could actually create to try and make a difference. And I pitched the idea to Vinny, and he was all in. Yeah, he had no sign off from Movember, but he was like, "We're doing it.
Let's do it." Yeah. Well, we from our first conversation about it, I was like, "Whatever it is, whenever it is, we'll do it." And it just felt right, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think doing an event and where people are just open and honest about their own experiences is so important. And I'll be honest, like, I struggled a lot that following year afterwards, and I needed a lot of help. And luckily, Ellie was there most of the time to pick me back up. But also Callum and Phil. I remember my friend committed suicide 28th of May, and 30th of May I was having a barbecue with these two, you know, and it was the most normal possible thing. And I think, speaking about it is such an important thing. I think we've all been touched by it, and you probably more so than anyone else.
In one way or another, I guess my experiences suffered from clinical depression, I guess immediately after the games. So the way I explained it to you earlier is probably quite the best way to explain it. It's like basically when you win the Olympic Games and it's been a 10-year struggle and you're outsiders, underdog side, and you win by a margin of 1/10 of a second, you're standing on top of the podium, you've lived up to this holy shadow, your family are in the stands and everyone's really supportive, and you've actually done it, and you thought you were going to be a bit of an embarrassment to the legacy of the team. Like the high cannot get any higher. And I think a lot of athletes will talk about the Olympic blues, but I think a lot of the time the Olympic blues is quite similar to what they've seen in people who win the lottery. So if you have a happiness-sadness curve, and everyone will have it, like regardless of whether you're depressed, happy, sad, or completely normal, whatever. You always go through this curve, happy, sad, happy, sad. But if someone wins the lottery, they absolutely like skyrocket up here. and then they come down and they're not necessarily more unhappy than they were before, but the comparison is horrific, and a lot of people really struggle to deal with it. So I think that's where most of the time Olympic blues kind of sit in, because you have that similar lottery winning experience, and like I felt completely invincible. Like anything could have hit me, and you know, tax bills, getting shot in the street, I didn't mind. Like it was fine because I was Olympic champion, nothing's an issue. But I think what happened for me was it didn't necessarily come back to that equilibrium. It kind of dipped a little bit further, and I think the main reason for that was because I'd kind of put my life and soul into being an Olympian and being hopefully an Olympic champion. And in essence, I kind of went through a bit of a mourning phase after that goal was gone. And you go through the normal kind of stages of loss, which is like, you know, confusion, sadness, like indifference. And for me, it just didn't really budge. So started pretty proactively trying to find help to make it better, and nothing really stuck at that stage. And I guess that's one of like my key take homes is like, even if you are struggling and you can't quite make it better, you need to keep pushing to find something else. Like if you have cancer, there's a if you break your arm, you know you need to get it splinted and you get a cast on for 6 months or whatever. With mental health, it's completely different, and the cure for you could be medication, counselling, standing on your head for 10 hours a day, yoga, gym, like whatever it is. You need to keep pushing through until you find that solution. And thankfully I did. So after kind of treading water for a long period of time and slowly finding myself sinking, you know, with the support of my family and my girlfriend, I eventually kind of found the light again, and that was through the support of really engaging with Dr. Steve Peters, who's helped with Vicky Pendleton and Laurie O'Sullivan in Liverpool to mixed success. And yeah, and he offered to help me for free, kind of embraced me into his support network, and can honestly say like he was one of the major factors that saved my life, I guess. As well as that family support network. But the take-home message there is you just have to keep fighting, and I think as soon as you give up, that's where it gets extremely dangerous. You need to keep pushing on, pushing forward to try and find solutions again and again, and you will get there. Like I'm the happiest I've ever been in the last couple of years, and I think my family and friends and girlfriend would back that up, is that there is a solution there and you will get better, but you need to keep pushing until you find it.
Definitely. I think something we discussed before was like the trying to find a solution. Yeah. And you said about that, it's quite important. Like, you know, there's this sort of, with mental health, there's no like, let's fix you. Yeah. With the weekend that, you know, it's like, I'm gonna fix you now. Like, it doesn't work like that. It's like a sort of a process, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think from like from an ally perspective, because obviously like I think all three of us consider ourselves like an ally to the cause of mental health. Like it's quite overused in the LGBT community, but I think it plays a lot of prominence in the sporting community, especially because not everyone is especially kind or in society. So I think allyship's really important, and it's not necessarily about trying to find a solution for that person. It's just being there for them and letting them know that you are there to support. Like one of my best mates, like the best support he ever gave me was he said to me like, I'll come over to your house and we don't have to chat. And this is another kind of cliche. It's like you must tell me all of your feelings immediately. That's not always the best thing to do. But he was like, I'll come over to your house and I'll just sit with you, and just so you've got company. We don't have to share anything. I'll just be there with you, and I'm here to support and love you. And I think that's the best possible thing you can do as an ally or someone who wants, or it's basically just kind of love and wanting to actually help your friends and your family.
I think that's one of the things that, like, I don't know, what you discussed before, it's like, I know that he's had a similar experience to me. I'm not to talk about it every day. Yeah. It's just knowing that both got that similar experience, it's there, it's happened. If it needs to come through, we can chat, no problem. Yeah. We don't have to, it's just like, I know the guy's there. You know, it's kind of, that's something as well. You just know someone else has got that same deep-rooted feeling, that journey that you're both on, and like, yeah, it's just nice, kind of nice to know. It's kind of comforting, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's definitely good to share. Like it's been kind of semi-scaly from my point of view. Like the more that I've spoken about it, the more I've gone kind of like, oh shit, you're suffering as well. And I was like, you're the happiest person on the face of it that I've ever known in my entire life, but you know, you're obviously going through some serious shit. So I think like developing the conversation is like really important as well. But it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the solution, you just have to be there to support. You're not there to treat, you're there to support. You know, they can either find that through whatever medium they choose, as long as it's not destructive. And it's your job as an ally to kind of helpfully nudge them towards the correct support that's out there.
Yeah.
I was pretty clueless before it happened to you.
Yeah.
About mental health, until no one spoke about it back then. So, you know, speaking to you, helped a lot. Like learning about it as well with you as well.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I think. I'm sorry, I'm completely lost my train of thought. I'm lost in what Callum was saying.
But the thing is, like, to Phil as well, like, I think that's okay. Like, I might have not seen it at the time where Phil maybe said the wrong thing or maybe have been a bit insensitive, but you got there and then you fully understood it, and I knew you had my back no matter what, and that's the best support you can give as an ally or a friend or a family member. And I think what's helped us develop as a trio over time is that like we've got better at supporting each other through these difficulties, and I think you always have to take positivity out of the dark times, otherwise it'd be a bit depressing. No pun on that. But yeah, I think it's brought us closer together. Like we understand each other a lot better, you know. And I think Phil, you're pretty where you were is pretty emblematic of where the sport is, which is in sport a lot of the time you're dismissed as being mentally weak. And that was something that was kind of put to me, and I'm like, well, looking back on it now, I can say, well, I'm not mentally weak because I had all of this pressure in the lead up to the 2016 Olympic Games, and I performed. So go fuck yourselves, basically. But what it was unwell, and that's a key detachment. Like no one gets to the level we're doing, or the same in business, or the same in life. Like no one's like a socialite or a high performer in business or whatever if they're mentally weak. You're just unwell. And I think it's that shift towards that kind of isolated area of like, okay, this person's unwell, they need to be taken care of for now, we should maybe lay off a little bit. And that's where you can make real progress, I guess.
I think it's definitely intrinsic, like where you all got to with your collective experiences that we're here today doing something like this. And, like wanting to kind of use who you are, use your profile, use your legs to kind of bring people together and get out there. I mean, one of the nicest things was, obviously, yesterday we were worried that no one was going to turn up on the ride because of the storm, but like when you first came back off that first loop, straight away you were chatting to, and it was like, oh man, it was so important. It wasn't just a ride, like you were chatting to that guy on the front, and I won't say anything about him, but it was real nice to kind of use cycling and use the road. I think it was cool, you know.
Yeah, I think my view on especially like Movember and men's mental health and stuff around that is I'll happily do everything I can for the rest of my life, and if it changes one life, that's enough for me.
Sure.
You know, I think it's just that mantra and that ethos towards it, and a big part of that is one, raising funds, and two is speaking about it openly and honestly, and de-shaming it. You know, like I'm big enough to admit, like sometimes I'll cry. You know, sometimes I break down about stuff which has gone on in my life, and it's just about having the right people around you who can kind of pick you back up or can help you process that. You know,
Definitely. Yeah.
And it can leave you stronger afterwards. I think like having gone through therapy, I guess, it's like you feel so much better equipped for life in a weird way. So I would recommend it to anyone in the same way that you might have a mental health advocate who likes yoga, I would recommend it to everyone. But you understand exactly how your brain works, you can recognize the triggers, and it just sets you up like perfectly for life. It's almost like you can detach yourself from conversations and look down on it from above and be like, okay, this person's trying to get a reaction out of me. I'm Phil. and I'm not going to bite. And you know, it's like there's nothing to lose. And I'd say for anyone who's considering whether like getting help or whatever is like a weakness. It's not at all, because you'll end up like set up for life. It just like it lets you learn so much about yourself.
Just gives you the tools, doesn't it?
Yeah, it gives you the tools. They should teach it primary, honestly.
Yeah.
Like it just sets you up for going forward, and you know exactly why you're reacting to something. You can identify bad habits, and you can ultimately live a happier life.
Yeah.
So that's the end of my speech about but yeah, and you know, who's to say I've got it right? You know, there's a whole multitude of different solutions out there. But I guess that's part of why we're here today, is just to raise awareness and talk about it, and
Yeah, eat loads of sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, basically, Phil spent the day eating sweets. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll go into a few questions if you want.
Yeah.
Would that be cool?
Yeah, so we're very open. So if your thing goes, anything goes, we'll edit it out.
No one's got anything. I've got one. So. I mean, does anyone want to go? Anyone want to go with anything? Because I was going to put them on the spot a little bit.
Yeah, Matt said he had a really good question.
Yeah,
Go on.
You said about it all day. Bragging about this question I've got. It's the best question ever asked since this morning. Oh, that's a very good question for tonight.
Yeah, what's this question?
You've got a question. You just said you've got a question.
Come on, Matt.
I've got a question. So, night before your race,
Yeah.
Chris Hoy came and spoke to you, and your mentality, yes, before he spoke to you, wasn't necessarily best going into it.
Yeah.
How would you describe the change around then? Like, obviously, was it didn't have an impact on you? Like, what was the change in terms of? It must have worked. Something must have reflected somewhere.
I think Phil might have a different opinion on this, but where I was going was kind of like, you kind of have this position of ambivalence a little bit. You're like, I'll just do the best I can, and if that's not good enough, I'll deal with it afterwards. If I win, that'll be fantastic, I'll deal with it afterwards, kind of thing. But I think what Chris did, as much as I was a little bit cynical about his time away from the sport, was that it kind of shifted us to the like side of being positive about it. Because his words carry weight, right? And you know, it's like my mum will always support me and always say I'm doing fantastically, which is lovely, but it's your mum, you know. And then when it's Chris that says it carries a bit more weight, and there's a bit of belief. I'd say, like, were you sitting on the same place, like?
He's done the same to me in London. That helped a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I asked him, "You think we have a chance to win a medal in London?" And he said, "Yeah, actually, I think we've got a good chance to win the gold, possibly if everything goes right." And that gave probably the same belief as it did for you.
But I'd say like the mindset of an athlete can be quite mechanical a lot of the time. Like we have plaster all over the velodrome, like logic before emotion, which is like really brutal. It's kind of like basically if it's like the Olympic Games that I just watched where you guys were racing was probably the first Olympic Games that I've watched in the last 15, 16 years that I've actually enjoyed. Because if anything happened, I would be like, oh my god, this person must be thinking that, this person must be thinking that. And in an athlete mindset, you're kind of like, that's not important, I need to continue with what I'm doing. And it's really robotic and mechanical and clinical. So it's a bit of a different mindset to think about, and that's where you kind of end up in that ambivalent stage. It's kind of like, I've done everything I possibly can, so win or lose, I have to kind of be happy with it. But there's a lot of fun in getting whipped up in the emotion as well. I've kind of flipped back now. Yeah. Emotion over logic. Yeah.
Also sounds like a crap.
He developed computer game addiction as well. You remember the day before the race?
Yeah.
The day before the race, we were literally sat for 6 or 7 hours on the sofa upside down. Jason was like laid like on his back on like the armrest. And we literally said, was it 5 p.m? So we should probably do some stretching here because we've been sat on the sofa for 7 hours playing the civilization game. And that was the night before the race, wasn't it?
I don't think we did the stretches.
No, we didn't. No. But that was kind of
Yeah.
One thing I was going to go into with all of you is maybe from a sporting point of view, like lowest point, highest point. You know, I guess we've kind of touched on it as well, like gold medals and stuff like that. Bill, but like.
Highest point was for me Rio.
Yeah.
Because I was in London. I came in really quick into the team. Rio was a big struggle. 4 years of maybe not even qualifying, trying to find a replacement for Chris. We tried loads of different riders before Callum stood out.
Always made myself
Well, I used to travel to Colombia, Mexico, and just do one race because we didn't get through the second round, and that was probably, to be fair, that was probably my low point as well. Just going to all these races.
That was a high point for you. Phil was notorious for, he'd go away to these World Cup trips, and then we'd be racing through it, and Phil would do a qualifying, they wouldn't get to the next round. So we'd spend the next few days, you'd be to Hobbiton, you'd go to the Watch Museum.
My low point is not getting to the final, the high point is going on holiday afterwards.
Very honest.
Yeah, high point is probably Rio gold medal for me.
Yeah, I guess I'm very similar. Rio is like, again, similar to kind of Callum's experience, but maybe not to the same like extremities. It's like, when I first started cycling, I knew I wanted to try and win the Olympics, I wanted to be a professional on the road. And when you do that when you're 23, it's kind of that big question of what now? Because I know even if I went back to the Olympics now and won another gold medal, that high will never be the same as the first time. And I really struggled the year afterwards as well. And again, I hate using the word that maybe I was like depressed for a year, but I really felt I was. When I was living away, I'd moved abroad, I was living on my own, and it was horrible that first year because I went from being Olympic champion to racing on the road professionally, and I just got the shit kicked out of me for a year. So I think that period there was a low point for me. So it's kind of like with big success like that, I think it's a double-edged sword.
Oh yeah. So we've been through the Olympic high. I guess so the low was probably at the Commonwealth Games in 2018. So it was for a multitude of different reasons. So I guess my heart wasn't like properly into cycling. In fact, it kind of become something like I hated, which was like a really horrible comparison from where I'd come from as a kid, where it was like this wonderful escape with a lovely community and all that kind of stuff. And at Commonwealth Games, basically the wheels fell off, literally. And I'd come in with huge expectation, I'd underperformed, and long story short, basically I had kind of like a mental breakdown, I guess. And with the help of my mum and my brother and a few other people that were there, kind of managed to get myself back to good health, good enough health to ride the kilo, because it was just like a single ride. It's 1 kilometre of the track, as hard as you can go. But that was probably the deciding factor for me as to when to retire and when to not. Because the reason why I was so determined to get back to race for the kilo was because I knew I had a decent chance of podiuming. I'd never won a Commonwealth Games medal. And it was just 4 laps of the track, so what could possibly go wrong? And I remember like I crossed the line, and there was one more line to go after me, and I saw that I was in second place, so I'm like, okay, I'm guaranteed at least a medal. And it didn't change anything inside me at all. Like, if anything, I was pretty relieved it was done, just wanted to go completely off grid, disappear for a little while. Probably like tears underneath the visor, which is quite a good reason why we have a visor, I guess. And yeah, it was just a really tough time. And I think as soon as I realised that winning wouldn't take away the feelings that I was feeling, that became more or less the deciding factor for stopping and finding something else. Because as a young kid, I was really diverse. Like, I was probably the slowest guy to ever be taken on the British cycling team, like in the last 20 years by far. Because they could see that as well. Like, I was doing absolutely every extracurricular, I was still going out of my way, still had a good social life, doing well academically. And for the last kind of 15 years, I've had that funneled into one thing, and one thing only. And it just wasn't doing it for me anymore. But I think the kind of upside to that is like through my recovery, I rediscovered that love for cycling and that love for community and what I love about the sport. And it was just really kind of like fitting and kind of beautiful to kind of start off where I did in that similar mindset. You know, over time, I had a fantastic time in British cycling with Phil, traveling around the world, watching him go to Hobbiton, and like had you know, arguably what are I wouldn't change it, the best 10 years of my life minimum, and then going into this period of like absolutely hating it, like just lowest of lows, really dealing with, you know, the stress that I put my family and everyone else, and then coming through the other side was really fitting. And now I'm back in a place where like I'm happy in myself. I've got a really nice support network. I've reconnected with my friends and my family, and I've still got that initial love for cycling. And it doesn't include a Garmin. Like the Garmin stays at home. I just go out, get lost, maybe stop at a pub, and that's the beauty of cycling for me. And you can go out with your mates, and it's something that I really enjoy. And I'm so thankful that I managed to find that again. Because it'd be a real shame if I left and I was like bitter and disappointed and all this kind of stuff. But now I've got to the point where like I'm proud of what I've done. I'm really happy for the time that I had. But it stopped at the right time, and I've still got that love for cycling, which is really important.
Some high. Anyone else?
Cal, you made quite a good point about the British media so quick.
Yeah.
Build your horse and knocks you down.
Yeah.
When you're out in games, how does that affect you guys? Because for us, I know we get really into, you know, we love watching you guys compete and stuff. Are you sheltered from that, or do you actively, you know, you just wanting to know what you guys' thoughts on like how the media, you know, they love when you're doing well, but they also want to knock you down pretty quick.
I'd say it affected you more than anyone.
Yeah, you've had a bad experience.
Because I was just in autopilot a little bit, but then you brought it to my attention afterwards, and then I got really annoyed about it. It was like, why are they asking me questions about a holiday when I'm going to a competition?
Well, I had a bad experience at the London Olympics.
We're doing it.
I literally got hate messages. Social media back then wasn't as big as it was now. I think it would be like Jack Callum. He knocked off a Malaysian guy in the Tokyo Olympics. He literally got death threats. His Instagram got hacked immediately after. You know, his mom got messages saying like, "Oh, we're gonna kill your son. We're gonna kill you." Like really horrible stuff. And in fact, I got loads of hate messages after London Olympics from the French. You know, with the media blown up at their crash. And I got loads of hate messages. The media went after me, and it affected me. But I kind of managed to block it out somehow. I think if it was now social media was bigger, it probably would have affected me even worse than it did back then. But I was kind of scared of the media for 2-3 years. They would say the wrong thing. Well, it's not really a wrong thing to say anymore, as long as you.
I mean, like, that's
swear, but
yeah. I'd say where I sit on it is like I'm quite pragmatic. It's like it's the journalist's job to find the best story. What's the best story? The golden run comes to an end. I understand they're doing their job. Whereas like, I'd say you two guys get a little bit more fired up about it occasionally and saying like, why are they reporting this? Why are they going after this? All this kind of stuff. But for me, it's, and the same with trolls as well. Like, I've had plenty of Chinese.
You get a lot of.
I get a lot of trolls. But they're quite funny a lot of the time.
It doesn't seem to affect you that much.
I think as a group, like we've had, there was like one incident about our logo which we used. There was a cycling club in London which weren't happy about it, and we had no knowledge of it. I think that's why we're quite good as a group. We all kind of have very different opinions.
Yeah,
Bill's opinion was like, change the logo today. My opinion was like, let's go tell them to fuck themselves. Callum was like, let's all take a breath and actually work out what's best.
Yeah.
So it's really, you've got that like.
Yeah, so you can see our new logo on the far left bag over there. So it's a minor change, but I think it hits the spot.
I would hope so.
Yeah, but Phil's the best with it because literally I don't need to turn on the alerts on my phone as when anyone's commented, because literally 5 seconds after someone's done anything, you get an immediate text from Phil saying, "Oh my god, this person said this."
I think it comes back from my experience.
That's shit telling you right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't judge them. They're there to do a job. If I was, again, like going back to that mindset of like where I am now as a spectator, I want to get whipped up on that. Like, it would be great to read a story about when the Olympic run's going to come to an end. Like, it'd be entertaining, instead of just saying like the mantle's going to continue and the robotic British cycling's going to win again. I'd be pretty boring, I think, on the whole. So like, yeah, I'm pretty pragmatic about it, unlike them.
So I guess we're chipping on here. We'll chat all night. But I think what we sort of thought about finishing on was, I guess, just kind of, obviously we've kind of been on a bit of a journey with you guys. We talked about why we're here today as well. But also like, yeah, let's just sort of reflects on the future. It's always a good thing to finish on. Yeah. Phil's got a job now. Yeah. What's going on?
A generator.
Yeah. I need some fencing actually.
So yeah, I guess that's coming into like the latter stages of a career. I guess I'm about 2.5 years ahead of you, but the transition away from sport into what you do after can be quite daunting, because at British Cycling you more or less have your arse wiped for you, like for everything. Like you have a private doctor, so you don't have any NHS connections whatsoever. Someone washes your bottles, someone washes your clothing. When you go on competitions, you're given an itinerary and told to be at the airport at this time, and if you're not very good at it, someone will probably escort you there. Like it's literally babysitting, which I found a bit annoying sometimes, because I was like, just get to the airport myself, leave me alone. But coming out of that and going into the real world is a really difficult transition for like a lot of athletes, and it's something that I try to help a lot of athletes with now. And basically the bit of advice is just go out and get any kind of job you possibly can. And it's like I'm not precious about it. In lockdown, when all of my kind of more pleasant gigs stopped working out, I worked at Tesco for 6 to 9 months.
Oh, that was amazing. We heard about the old lady we were chatting to.
Yeah. And it's like from my point, like everyone might be thinking, oh, like that's a bit, that's a bit shit. And it probably was a bit shit. But from my perspective, like I'd never had an entry-level job. And to be working and doing deliveries at the peak of lockdown and going in and seeing people that literally hadn't seen people for 3 months and hadn't engaged. I've had like old ladies break down to me in front of me as the Tesco delivery man, and I've got my 10 minutes to
What did you forget?
ship the shopping. I'm just gonna say, maybe see you next week. But
Max Ward's laughing at you when you deliver to shopping.
yeah, but that's the bit that just like doesn't matter. It's like I'm doing the best I can, and I want to keep busy, and I want to try and gain some life experience, because we're really mollycoddled in cycling, and now I've got a really decent job that I enjoy, and you'll have that from it at some point.
Bit of time, hopefully.
Actually, no, I feel on the road, just retire to Pleasant Island and the Virgin Islands.
Tell us about getting your bike.
Yeah, what's next for you, Bill?
Yeah.
Been with Ineos, which was formerly Sky, for 5 years, so kind of a big chunk of my life also was ENL, and now making the change to move to EF, and it's something I'm super excited about. I think change is always good, so yeah, that's my next step. And Phil's a big businessman.
Well, yeah, I took Callum's advice. I was trying to figure out what I would like to do after cycling, and Callum literally said to me, just get a job, just work any job. I took his advice 1 week, and I just started applying for loads of jobs. And I know I wanted to be in sales. My father-in-law works in kind of construction, so I thought, I'm going to apply for something like that. Applied on the weekend, got a job interview on the Monday, and got an offer straight away. Accepted the job, and I actually really enjoy it now.
And I can't tell you how irritating it is how often this guy lands on his feet. Literally, like.
I was always trying to call him out about like what do you actually do? The explanation was so obvious. Well, Jesus, I need coffee, man.
Yeah, I thought I can't really replace what I've got with cycling, but working a real job. Well, real job. And you still get the same camaraderie, you still meet like the same kind of people, and all the people I've met so far work with, they're all really good guys, and I thought I couldn't really replace it. So yeah, I'm enjoying it so far.
Nice.
Good to see you.
Well done, mate.
Well, I guess we'll should we wrap that one up?
Yeah.
I think a big hand for these guys now. So we'll leave the question for the small kids for the next one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fair.